Hi everyone, it's John at RFM Calc, and today I'm talking about ShopWired. So, ShopWired is a UK based software as a service e commerce platform, and that's kind of all I can tell you from the website, really. So obviously they've got plenty of information about how the platform works and the customer feedback and so on, but there's actually nothing on the site that I could find in terms of about them, meeting the team, the history of the platform. So I had to go digging around a bit, which is unusual for platforms like this. Normally they like to kind of give that picture and that background story. But what I've been able to find elsewhere is they launched around 2012/2013, so 7, 8 years old now. According to the piece I read, there's 7,000 stores currently using ShopWired. Now, that might be more now. I should say builtwith.com says 1,700 in terms of the stores they know about, but that will always be a bit lower. But I think either way, it's still a significant platform. I think they're certainly, from what I can see, gaining market share and people are switching to ShopWired on a fairly regular basis. So that's why I wanted to talk about them today. One of the claims they make is that it's the best rated e-commerce platform, or the UK's best rated e-commerce platform, I should say. So it's quite interesting actually. Quite a lot of UK e-commerce platform providers make some kind of statement on the homepage about them being the best. You don't really see it so much with US platforms, but in the UK, kind of everyone says they're the best. I'm not sure this is actually true because if I just bring up their reviews here on Trustpilot, you can see 4.8 overall is great, but Blue Park, which is a system I recently looked at as well, is 4.9. So it's kind of difficult to make the case really that they're the best rated. But either way, there's a lot on the site about giving great customer support, and the feedback is almost overwhelmingly positive. So I don't really mind platforms kind of making these kind of statements. I think it's just then a little bit difficult for the user to know what to believe. But either way, it's a highly rated platform, and I think it's definitely a platform worth talking about. And I should add as well, before we get started, that obviously I wouldn't be doing this video if it didn't integrate with RFM Calc. And like all good platforms, it does, no problem. So we'll run through that today. Pricing wise, I just wanted to touch on. So you see here you've got the Pro, Advanced and Premium plan. So it's pitched around the kind of EKM, Shopify type level. So not ultra cheap, like Squarespace and Big Cartel. So not at that really low end of the market, but obviously not at that enterprise end of the market either. It's kind of that middle ground where I think there's a lot of e-commerce platforms operating in this space. Shopify obviously being the biggest. But I think there's a lot to go at for platforms in that space, which is why a lot of targeting that kind of level. So you can see you've got a turnover limit here, which is interesting. So up to kind of 75,000 a year for your Pro plan, and then up to $500,000 a year for the Premium plan, which again isn't huge in terms of e-commerce. But if you just need a site that does everything and it's all under one roof, then the pricing, I would say, it seems fairly reasonable, given the features you get, which we'll run through shortly. They do also have an enterprise kind of level plan as well, so targeting those bigger brands. They list some, bigger brands here like EDF and Woucher and so on, and Superdrug, which are obviously huge businesses. So that's interesting as well, that they're trying to move into that enterprise space as well as targeting this kind of smaller brands also. So today we're going to talk about the platform itself. I'll give a little demo of the admin and the various features, not super in-depth, but just to kind of give you an overview of how it works. We'll then talk about how we can export the orders from ShopWired into RFM Calc in terms of a CSV file, and we'll go through in detail the structure of that CSV file. Finally, we'll talk about how we then import that CSV file into RFM Calc, how we can set up a project for ShopWired, import that data and generate all the great reports that we give you in terms of lifetime value, average time between orders, customer cohort analysis, RFM segmentation. We'll talk about all of that as well. So to start with, let's have a look at our ShopWired dashboard. So this is our ShopWired dashboard. You can see I've logged in now to my test trial account, which was useful. So they give you a free, I think it's 14-day trial to try all the features, which is great. So this gives a very kind of basic overview in terms of revenue, in terms of recent orders and so on. We've got the order screen here, which we'll come back to in a second, but this lists all the orders. It's not, I would say, quite as intuitive as some platforms. So normally you can kind of just maybe update the status directly from this page just by maybe clicking paid here. Here you kind of got to click the tick box. Oh, that's the wrong tick box. Or you've got to click the tick box over here and then do this. And it's not, it's not massively difficult, but it's just slightly less intuitive, I would say, than some platforms. One thing that is quite impressive is the report section. So A lot of e-commerce platforms don't give you much really in terms of reporting. They kind of obviously let you integrate with Google Analytics and so on, but in terms of platform native reporting, there's not a massive amount there. ShopWired does actually have more than most sites, I would say. So you've got sales by category, sales by product, sales by customer. You've got things like failed searches as well. I've not done any searches, but you can see searches that don't result in products being displayed, which is quite interesting data to know as well. So obviously it's not the level of reporting that you get with RFM Calc because no e-commerce platform provides that, but there's still a decent amount of reports, and more so I would say than most e-commerce platforms. You've then got things like customers, products is interesting as well. So I think in terms of creating products, it's reasonably intuitive. Let me just give you a little demonstration here. So if I just do a quick test product, one of the things I quite liked is how you can create variations. So you've got all your standard fields here in terms of adding images and so on. That's all fairly straightforward. But product variants works quite nicely. So if I just do a kind of test variant here, and then go option 1, option 2. So I'm just comma separating these. Option 3. And then if I just press, oh, I didn't save it, hang on. So I've got to press enter here. That's something to be aware of. But then I can generate the combination straight away. So that's quite nice. And that's fairly intuitive, I would say. So straight away, I can generate my options, add my price and SKU and stock levels per option without having to kind of go in and out and assign different simple variants to the parent product and so on. So that's actually quite intuitive. But then at the same time, you've got things like this product choices section. Which, you know, I've worked online for kind of 20 years. I genuinely have absolutely no idea what this means. There's no help. I'm sure it's documented somewhere. But then you've got kind of, you know, again, you've got a little bit there that's not quite so intuitive. I think with a lot of these platforms, you sometimes feel like it's kind of been built by a developer without kind of thinking really about that end user experience. So genuinely, absolutely no idea what product choices means. But like I say, I'm sure it's documented somewhere, but it's just that balance. But things like I say, I wanted to highlight kind of setting up variants because that is actually how they've done that. Really intuitive and a nice way to do it, and better than a lot of platforms. You've then got quite a lot of options in terms of categories. What I would say with categories as well, so I've made this category here. So I can change the sort order by adding a value here. But if I actually go into the category, see I've done it wrong again. You've got to click on products. I couldn't actually work out how to merchandise the category. So one of the key things in e-commerce is obviously being able to change the order products show in your category. And genuinely, I looked at this for about 5 minutes, tried dragging all over the place and looking for different options. I couldn't figure out how to actually merchandise the category. So it might be somewhere else. I'm sure it's documented somewhere. But again, this particular section isn't quite as intuitive as I feel it could be. A lot of platforms obviously give you a visual merchandiser just to drag your products around really easily. So, you know, that's not a criticism. Obviously, you know, platforms like this that haven't been around quite as long are always evolving and adding new features. But I think it's just something to bear in mind if you've never used e-commerce or an e-commerce platform before. There might be a little bit of a learning curve for using a platform like this. We've then got quite a few settings in terms of checkout. So one of the great things, or useful things I should say, is that it does offer offline payment methods, which is great. So for testing, you don't need to set up real gateways. In terms of payment gateways, you've got quite a few options. So you've got PayPal and Stripe and Revolut as the main ones, but then they do offer a lot of kind of payment gateway integrations out of the box. That's quite a long list there, which is pretty good. So, you know, whoever you're using, hopefully you're covered by that. So that's nice. Delivery rates is relatively simple to set up as well. And then if I just go back to the checkout, one kind of nice thing as well is you can add custom questions during the order process. So one of the ones, I just did a stupid test here. Do you really want this order? But typically you could ask something like, how did you hear about us? And then give a few options to the customer, and that'll automatically appear in the checkout. So that's quite a nice feature as well. In terms of marketing, you've got a few options here in terms of obviously discount codes and so on. And then the last thing I really wanted to touch on is just themes. So themes, again, it works, but it's not quite as intuitive, I think, as some other sites, which make it really easy to change the look and feel and theme of your site. So you can see I've got my install theme here. I can kind of edit it in an advanced way the HTML code. To change themes, you have to go to your available themes here, which opens in a new window. And then if I go to a theme, obviously they've got a good range of themes, which is great. So let's say I want to install this block type. I then have to click on it, install this theme, wait a little second, which is fine. Or maybe more than a little second. There we go. And then I can make it live. But then I've got this situation now where, because it's opened a new window, I've now got this page open for my theme, and I've got this page open for my theme, and it's just not quite as smooth as it could be. So what I'm going to do is just, what do I do? Hang on. So I've made that one, I've made that block type theme live, and then my old theme I can just delete. Like so. So that's fine, although it doesn't immediately remove it. So if I go back to install themes, it's gone. So again, it's just that kind of not quite as smooth as it could be. So it's nice, it's lots of features, and that's great. And I think it's not, it's not difficult to pick up, particularly if you've got some experience in e-commerce. But if you're coming from a platform like Big Cartel or Squarespace, which is ultra simple, and everything on the admin's really been thought through to make it so simple and smooth, you might kind of find yourself getting a little bit lost here. So that's just something to bear in mind. And a lot of e-commerce platforms are like that. I think once you start adding more features, it gets more and more difficult to kind of keep it smooth and easy to use. But certainly on the whole, what I would say is it's not a difficult platform to use. It's got a lot of features, but there's just one or two bits where maybe the smoothness and the intuitiveness could be improved. But you could say that about a lot of e-commerce platforms. So what I'm going to do now is go back to my order screen, because obviously to get the orders into RFM Calc, we need to export as a CSV. So how can we do that? The answer is pretty simply, which is good. So like all good e-commerce platforms, ShopWired comes with a native CSV exporter. You can see just to the top right here, we've got this little export option. So I'm just going to click that. So it gives you not a huge number of options, I would say, which is fine. You can choose a date range if you want. Obviously, I'm going to export all the orders because there's not many, and typically that's what I want to do anyway. You've then got the option to either include or exclude products. So how this will work is, if you don't tick that, it will just export the order data. If you tick that, it will export in a multi-line CSV format the product data as well associated with each order. So I'll demonstrate both, but for RFM Calc, we don't really do anything with the product data. We focus really on that order level and customer level, so I can exclude that for RFM Calc. And then you've also got the option just to select certain statuses as well. So if you don't want to include all statuses, that's fine. You can do that before you export. Obviously, you can do that on the RFM Calc side as well if you want to exclude certain statuses. But just, say you've got millions of cancelled orders that you don't want to include, and you just want to keep the file size smaller, you can exclude or just select, completed orders, for example. So that's it. I'll just click prepare my export. That generates, obviously, for bigger files, I assume it will take a bit longer to generate, but nice and quick, because obviously a small number of orders on my test site. And then I just click download and save the file. Simple as that. Okay, so now we've downloaded the file. Let's have a look what it looks like. So this is the orders file. This is the variant without including the product data, which is the version I've just downloaded. So obviously I've kind of put this into Excel as a demonstration and just widened the columns just to make it a bit more readable. So I'll just run through all the columns and give you an overview of the general structure. So I think the first thing to know is that orders run newest to oldest. So you've got your newest order at the top and your oldest order at the bottom. So different e-commerce platforms do this in different ways. Shopify is another platform that exports newest to oldest. Platforms like Magento export oldest to newest, so that's just something to be aware of. RFM Calc can obviously handle both out of the box, no problem. But obviously it's good to understand that. We've then got kind of key information here, like the order ID, date in UK format. We've then got the costs in terms of shipping, any discounts. You've got your subtotal and your grand total. So your grand total is obviously your subtotal plus your shipping, which works, pretty logically, I think. Payment method for all of these is offline, because I'm obviously using an offline payment method, but this will show if you're using a different gateway. That'll be listed here. You've got your delivery method here as well. And then we get into kind of the billing information, so billing company, billing name, billing email, phone, all the address fields as well, country, and so on, billing country code, and then your delivery. So what I would say is that even if you specify the same billing address and delivery address, it will still repeat those fields in the delivery fields as well. So one or two of these, I've selected purposely a different delivery address just to see how that's handled to the billing address. But either way, even if they're the same, it will still repeat all that information in the delivery fields as well, which is pretty standard actually. Most e-commerce platforms do that, and that makes it a lot easier, I think, to interpret for whatever you're importing this into. If you need that delivery information, you don't have to worry about kind of blank delivery fields and having to check the billing fields. It'll always be in the delivery field, which I think is sensible. And then you've got basically a few more extra little fields here as well. So marketing consent, if they're ticked to be included on your marketing. Obviously got the order status, the currency as well, which is useful, which RFM Calc can interpret. And then we've got comments. So this is where a slight disappointment really with how ShopWired works. So you remember I mentioned a few minutes ago that I'd added a custom question to the checkout in terms of, do you really want this order? And you can see for these, no. Some of them say yes. Instead of putting this as a separate column, which is what other platforms do, it's just put it in the comments column, which is a little bit lazy, I've got to be honest, in terms of how they develop that. So what should happen here really is that this question, do you really want this order, should be a separate column in the CSV. You can then analyze that data. You can use it as a custom column in RFM Calc. You can use it for whatever you're importing into. You can basically filter by that column. So, for example, if you were asking customers how they found you as a question, you'd have how did you find us as a column at the top. And then you'd have the values underneath, which then makes it really easy to filter and actually dive into that data. Whereas what ShopWired does, unfortunately, is just lumps it in this comments section, which is a bit naff, to be honest, which is a shame. Obviously, that only applies if you're using a custom question on the checkout, which most people, I guess, probably won't be anyway. But that's just something to bear in mind, because other platforms, Squarespace, for example, which has this feature, will list it as an individual column on the CSV, which is a much better way to handle it. So that's hopefully something they can improve in future. But for now, it's kind of a little bit, it makes kind of the additional checkout questions a little bit redundant in terms of actually using that data for RFM Calc, which is a shame. You then got a voucher code column, so for any customers who've used the voucher code. And then you've also got an admin comments section. So this is fine, obviously, to lump into one column, just to kind of give you the details of any. So for this first order, I added a test comment, and then you've got the status updates as well. So that's useful data to have. But yeah, I think overall it's a fairly standard CSV. Obviously, we've got all the data we need for RFM Calc to generate our fantastic reports and to allow us to import it into RFM Calc. But yeah, the only kind of negative really is just this: the additional order questions don't feature as their own columns; they just get lumped into a comments column. But apart from that, everything looks pretty sound. I just wanted as well just to demonstrate the multi-line version. So this is again the same export, but this time I selected to include the products rather than to not include them. So you can see basically we've got multiple lines for orders where there's more than one product. This is all the same data as before, so it repeats all the same information in terms of billing address and delivery address. It's repeated on every line. So a lot of platforms, when they're exporting product-based CSVs, will just have the key order information on the top line and then the product information on subsequent lines tied together by repeating the order ID. ShopWired repeats everything on every line, which is fine. That's obviously not a problem as well for any system to import, or certainly not for RFM Calc. But if I scroll across here, you'll see we've got some extra columns on the end for the product details. So you can see the products and the variants and so on that the customer has ordered on their order. So we don't need that for RFM Calc because we don't really look at product data. The reason being, every e-commerce platform exports product data in a different way, so it's quite difficult to then try and build a report around that. But either way, there's an option there if you do want to look at the product data, which is good. That's definitely a positive from ShopWired that they give you the option to export the products. What I would say as well, from an RFM Calc point of view, if you've already set up a CSV export with ShopWired to include the products, we can still handle this absolutely no problem at all. So you don't have to export it without the products. What we will do is we'll combine all the order information. Even if it is a multi-line CSV, we can handle that out of the box. So you don't have to go back and export the single line version. If you're already working with the multi-line product version, you can import that straight into RFM Calc, no problem at all. Great, so let me just go back to the order file we're going to be using. So now we're going to run through in RFM Calc how to set up a project and how to import this file. So all we need to do, I'm just going to go back to my RFM Calc test plan here, my test account, where I've been doing various test projects for different platforms. So we just need to create a new project, and we'll just call it test ShopWired. Put in a dummy URL. The default project currency is GBP, which is fine because that's what is set up in my store and what I've been using. Now for the date, this is quite important. You'll remember I said that ShopWired exports, or at least for my store, has exported in the European kind of UK date format. So day, then month and year. So this, for example, is the 3rd of January, not the 1st of March. So just to make sure we're interpreting that correctly, you can force the European date interpretation here. For date ordering, you'll remember I said that ShopWired runs newest to oldest, so you can force that here if you want, but auto select is probably the safest option just in case. And then that's everything you need really for the project setup. So we'll save that. And now I can go into my project and schedule my first report. So all I'm going to do is upload the raw CSV that I've just exported. So not the kind of Excel version where I've, expanded the columns and so on to make it a bit more readable, but this is exactly the same data. So I'll click upload CSV, and then it's just a case of mapping the columns. So order ID, if you'll remember, is just order ID handily. Date is date. Currency code, now there is a currency column just a little bit further along here. Where's it gone? It's after the delivery and billing information. There we are, we've got the currency column here. So let me just find that. There it is. Now, the reason the currency column is useful is because what RFM Calc will do, if you have orders in multiple currencies, we will convert the value into your base currency at the prevailing exchange rate. And that allows you to have accurate kind of lifetime value, average order value and so on, gives you accurate figures in your base currency. But we'll do that conversion for you at the time the report is generated, which is a pretty cool feature if you've got multiple currencies coming through. For the order value, let me just close the multi-line one. For the order value, we'll go back over here and you can see we've got this grand total. So you could do the subtotal if you don't want to include shipping. You can basically select any column you want for this. It's really flexible. But grand total is what I would use. I always like to include everything in the values I'm reporting, tax, shipping, everything, to give that complete picture of what customers are actually spending with you. And then for order status, so you remember if we just go back across here, we do have a status column here called order status just before the currency that I selected previously. So that's after all the billing and shipping addresses. There we go. Now, order status isn't actually used for anything. All we use this for is if you want to exclude certain statuses, you can comma separate them here. So you'll remember with ShopWired, you've got the option when you export it to exclude certain statuses. If you're including everything in your export, but you just want to exclude them on the RFM Calc end, that's absolutely fine. So if I wanted to, I could just comma separate a list of statuses here to exclude them. Now for the customer ID column, you'll notice there isn't an internal customer ID value for ShopWired, which is fine. Most e-commerce platforms don't have this. The reason being that obviously we're not forcing customers to create an account, which is obviously positive from a user experience point of view, and certainly a major change, I would say, in e-commerce in the past 10, 15 years, where a long time ago everyone had to have an account to purchase. Very few e-commerce platforms require that now. So the best identifier to use really is the email address. So I'm going to use the billing email. And that's the kind of identifier we'd always recommend as the email address, because that's a pretty kind of obviously unique to that customer. It gives you a solid kind of ID to use to work out if a customer is new or returning and so on. You can also exclude customer IDs here. So if there's certain IDs within your business, for example, that you want to exclude from the report, you can do that here. You can also kind of do wildcards. So for example, if you wanted to exclude everyone on your own domain, every customer ID, you could do this 3 asterisks yourdomain.com, and that will match all email IDs containing your domain. So you can kind of blanket exclude customer IDs as well, which is useful. Obviously, I'm not going to do that because I don't need to for this test order file that I've created. But that's a really useful feature to save you manually having to go through the CSV and take them out before you upload. Although you can do that, of course, as well if you want to. And then the customer email, we use the billing email again. Customer phone, we do have as well. which was billing telephone. Now for the name, ShopWired combines the first name and surname into one field, which is fine. So some e-commerce platforms separate them. ShopWired doesn't. That's no problem. All you have to do is set the name for the first name column and just ignore the last name column. And if you forget that, there's a bit of context help there, just explaining that as well. Really straightforward. And then we do have a company column as well, which I'll include. So these fields aren't essential. All this does is that in certain parts of the report, we'll kind of list out your best customers and key customers in terms of, lapsed customers and maybe your best performing customers who haven't purchased for 6 months and things like that. And all that does is just pull that data through to those tables. And also we'll generate a full customer CSV file, so a big list of all your customers with all key kind of order data against them. So we use that in that file as well. So it's not essential, but it just kind of helps add context and give more information in various parts of the report. Finally, if your account plan supports it, so most of the paid account plans do, you can add custom columns. So one kind of nice easy one that a lot of people like to use is payment method. And what this will do is we will basically generate additional reports around these custom columns. So based on what the customer uses on their first order for payment method, will then generate a lifetime value based on that, the average time to the second order, and things like that. So it gives you kind of some really nice additional reports, which you can basically tie around custom columns. Like I say, we can't do that around the additional questions we're asking at checkout because Shop kind of lumps that into the comments column, as I mentioned, so we can't easily extract that data, which is a shame. But on the flip side, you can, of course, add additional columns to the CSV manually before you upload it, and that's something I'll talk about in a future video. So if you want to pull in data from a different system matched around kind of the order ID, you can do that, which is really, really powerful, and then we can generate reports around those custom columns for you as part of your RFM Calc report. So that's definitely a useful feature to have. And then that's pretty much it. So if I just call this test ShopWired 1, you can anonymize the customer data for any report you generate if you want. All that will do is just, you remember I mentioned for kind of name and email, they appear in certain parts of the report. All this will do, if you tick this option, is just anonymize that, so real names and emails don't appear in your report. It doesn't affect any of the numeric data, but sometimes some of our customers can be, a little bit sensitive about having real names and emails and so on appearing in the report data, so that will completely anonymize it. And then the final option I'm going to tick is just to overwrite the default project column mappings. So all that will do is just save all these column mappings that I've done here. So I've been through and selected these. It will save those against the project. So next time I upload a CSV, I won't have to map these again, which is obviously really, really useful and saves a lot of time next time. So I'll save the mappings and continue. And that's it. Simple as that. So that report is now queued. I'll get an email in a couple of minutes saying that's ready to view. And I'll be able to obviously then view all the data that's been generated. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. So today we talked about ShopWired, a little bit about the platform. We've been through the admin area and given a little demo of that and how it works. We've then been through in terms of how to export ShopWired orders as a CSV, how to upload them back into RFM Calc, and how to schedule and generate the report. So hopefully that's been useful and comprehensive. Obviously, if you've got any questions, feel free to reach out to us on the RFM Calc site. But if not, I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Thanks, everyone.